a little bit differently. And transportation is something that in this country we grow up with, and it's so ingrained that it basically means car, right?
Yeah.
Transportation is car, and that's about it.
Yeah, I think it's like 2% of the miles we travel are something different than a car. 98% are car.
Yeah,
And it's a monoculture.
yeah, and I don't think that that's necessarily been unhealthy for a long time, probably.
It's helped us grow and be
Yeah.
very productive, and lots of good stuff with it.
Yeah. And you, let's learn a little bit about you. You can tweet in questions to us as usual to Fearless Force at Fearless Force, and we'll read them. We'll read them and we'll ask the questions that I can't think of. So where'd you grow up?
Mostly Colorado. I was up to 7 in Cleveland, and then here in Denver, then Boulder. So most of my time was in Colorado.
So you actually grew up in Boulder.
Yeah, I was skiing a lot, and I rode a Vespa scooter around town, and yeah, this was the place.
And then you're a kid. Are you into cars or?
Oh, I was a complete car nut. I still love cars. I mean, I had more Matchbox cars than anyone in the city probably, and I was a complete nerd.
Do you still have them?
No, I don't.
No,
I wish I did.
you wish you did.
I wish I did. But I love cars. I mean, but here I am, this car designer, trying to figure out how to make a more balanced transportation system.
Yeah. Well, is that because you loved cars and you grew up in Boulder? Is there any
Well, I love cars,
relationship?
but I say I love cars, but I like people more. So I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of like having to figure things out a little bit.
So you went to Boulder High or
Went to Fairview High.
Fairview,
Yeah.
and you graduated and you
I went
said
off
I'm going to go
I went to car design school.
Oh, really?
Yeah, to Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, California.
Wow.
And
That's where I mean I wish that I could go to school there.
Yeah, I graduated like 10 guys, and one of them is the Porsche Boxster designer, and one
Yeah.
of them designed the Mini, and one of them designed the Dodge Viper.
Frank
Yeah, Frank Stephenson.
Stephenson.
He was
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, I mean I worked a lot on the Mini. Awesome guy.
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome guy. Where's he now?
He's I think head of design of McLaren or something. And
Because he went to Ferrari for a while, I think, right?
He's moved around.
Yeah. He's had a good career. Did a good job on the Mini.
Yeah.
That was
Well,
kind of a dream thing for him, actually.
Well, Chris Bangle, head of BMW design, kind of said, we're going to look for a new Mini, and we're not going to like take the butt of that car and add it to the front of this car.
Right.
We're just going to send out for all these models, and they put in all these. They went, I guess, in the basement in the BMW, and they had like 20 different designs, and Frank's one.
And you know what Frank's process was, which I thought was really brilliant. He designed the Mini in each era. Like if it
Yeah.
was a contemporary car that had continued to evolve, he
Yeah.
designed the 70s,
Yeah.
the 80s, and then said, and here's where it arrived.
Car design's cool stuff.
It's
and,
cool.
You know, and that's why I think it's a part of the process of making our better cities now.
Yeah.
Is how we apply it.
Well, he was really passionate about the idea that he was getting an opportunity to design a small car,
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
And it was a bit of a calling,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And to say, and at the time, small cars were not
Being talked
sexy
about, no.
or being talked about.
Let's
And
move the pendulum back the other way now.
Yeah. And when he designed that car, I think it was, can you get people to be aspirational about the smallest car in America?
Yeah.
We got to, kind of work on that idea too.
Yeah.
And it worked. The next year was the first year that small car sales, not just the Mini, but small car sales in general went up.
That's good.
So it made the whole thing sexy.
That's good.
Yeah. So now we got to make something else sexy. Is that part of how you look at it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that right now, I think right now it's like if you did a survey and you asked people what's their green transportation of the future, I think people would say maybe I'll have an electric car, or they might say I might ride a bike more, take a bus more. But
Yeah.
where would the internet factor in all that? I mean, there's this whole internet world we live in now that allows us to rethink things, and so
Mhm.
as you did on B-Cycle, on demand, renting rather than owning.
Right.
If we own our cars and they only get used 1 out of every 24 hours,
Right.
so for 23 hours they sit there.
Yeah.
That's a lot of waste.
So speak a little bit to the on-demand thing, because even when we were working on B-Cycle, in some ways, I don't know that we recognized how powerful that piece of it is. And as bike sharing's coming to Boulder, there's a fair amount of people that are like, Boulder? I mean, there's more bikes than people in Boulder. We don't need bike sharing. And part of the whole point is it's there when you want it to be, and then it goes away.
Yeah, it's like somebody said, I just want a glass of milk. I don't need to own a cow. So, I mean, it's a different way of doing things, and it's really the internet age. It's the iPhones, these mobile devices
Yeah.
that allow us to really just rent things when we need them, rather than necessarily having to own them.
Right.
And we've seen Zipcar, a car sharing company. I'm not a big fan of the term car sharing because most people have never shared a car.
Yeah.
They've rented a car. It's really micro rental.
Right.
So
yeah, car sharing feels a little bit like I got to get into something I'm not ready for.
yeah,
Like
not many
like
people know
home
what it
sharing.
is. Millions of people have rented cars, so why don't we call it micro rental?
Yeah.
You know, so we're just renting it for by the minute or by the hour.
Yeah.
But that idea of, you know, if you live in Boston, you walk out your door and you want some wheels, you want to go to Costco or something, and you
Yeah.
usually take the train every day.
Yeah.
It's a great thing that they can do, where you can walk up, put your little smart card on the window, pop the locks, get inside this thing, start it up, and you have wheels.
Yeah.
And that's really catching on and growing. And in the cities, you know, I really, you know, my big thing is, in the United States, we really need to look at this by our land density. It's kind of like the solution for New York is not the solution for Boulder.
Right.
I think of it as thick city and thin city. So like tall buildings of New York City are thick cities, and then suburban, you know, suburban Colorado, or I mean suburban Denver, Phoenix, Los Angeles.
Yeah.
That's thin city.
Right.
And there's going to be a different solution in these denser, in these more sprawled out areas than there will be in these dense urban areas.
Are you a member of a car share?
I have been. I haven't been using it lately, but I have been part of Boulder's Ego car share.
Eco car.
It's called Ego.
Ego.
Yeah, Ego. Ego. Yeah.
And how are they doing? Are they doing all right?
It's a non-profit, and they don't. They've not been growing that as fast as like a zip car. But again,
Right.
this is thin city. This is the suburban part where, you know, not many people are going to walk out of their house and walk a mile to get a car.
Right.
When you're in Boston, you have people living on top of each other in density. You can it makes sense economically to place the cars, you know, every 4 blocks or every 6 blocks.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense to do that in Denver. So
Mhm.
Denver has less than 30 car share vehicles after 10 years, whereas
For the whole city.
for the whole city,
Yeah.
versus, you know, there's 7,000.
And that's Ego car in Denver too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is it going to look like? Give me an example of what it looks like in a thick city.
A thick city, I think you get a sense of it already when you go to New York and Manhattan. If you're familiar with taking cabs,
I am. I
Yeah.
know.
So you know
I
what
know
it's
that
like to walk out of
technology.
a restaurant and hail a cab.
Yeah.
Well, you're getting transportation on demand. So
Right.
you could be taking the subway, you could take that, you could take a cab. You're basically getting things on the go. I really think of the future of thick city mobility kind of like Tarzan. You're swinging from vine to vine, from mode to mode. And these little devices are going to make that seamless for you, where you're going to be able to find the cab easier, you're going to get on it, or you might take a bike share, or
Right.
you might do a car share. But you're going to have mode to mode to mode to mode, and then it's all going to be integrated seamlessly.
How did you get here
Today?
today?
Buy an automobile.
You did. You drove a
I
car?
actually drove a car today.
Good for you to just say.
It's not the car, not the car I own, but I drove a car, and I've lived in Boulder for 9 years without
Yeah.
owning a car.
Without owning a car.
Yeah.
You borrowed a car or you just bought a car?
I've been borrowing a car for the last month because of some things I've been doing in my life.
So you're borrowing a car.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's better, I guess, for you than to owning. Like if you were owning a car, I'd feel like you're going backwards.
Well, that might be the case, but not right now. I'm
Yeah.
not owning that car.
What about things? I had looked at Google and I thought Google is going to solve transportation. Maybe it's just because you kind of look to them and you think, well, they solve everything, so why not solve transportation too? And what I thought was, just like this happens probably to everybody. You get on the highway and you get on with a car that's next to you. You drive for, however, 4 miles or something. You get off and you notice that the people that got on with you are getting off too. And then, they turn into the same complex that you turn into, and then they park, 12 spots down. And you're like, that was a huge waste.
Yeah.
But there's no way of knowing where they were going and where I'm going, So, like, what do you do with that? So could somebody keep track of where everybody's going? And I thought, well, maybe Google could do that. Someone's passing me a note, but it's upside down. You're going to want to flip it that way. Yeah.
So I had a message to me.
Yeah. They want you to speak up.
Speak up. Google could be the company that is a part of solving this. I mean,
Yeah.
what you've just talked about is a way of coordinating our movement.
Mm-hmm.
When things start getting intelligent and they start getting on the grid, all of a sudden they start talking about strategies in which, could it be one FedEx letter that has this chip in it in a truck, FedEx truck, next to a UPS truck across the street has another package with a chip in it, and they both know they're going up by your house, and they start brokering. Well, what if we just go in one truck?
That's interesting.
But what we're moving into is the physical internet, right?
Right.
And that's where it's
when there's data attached to all the objects, right?
We're going into this physical internet, and there's a lot of issues about Big Brother and what's this? I don't want to be tracked and all that stuff.
Right.
But there's a lot of really positive things that come along with that.
Do you know these guys Zimride?
Yeah. I don't know the people personally.
I went out and I met with them because I had that idea that Google would do it, and then Zimride pretty much is that. You say, hey, I need to go from here to there, and I usually do it on Wednesdays, and you get a list of people who are making that same trip or something similar.
Digital hitchhiking, kind of, and the part that's cool about it, because if you're all connected through the digital networks, the social networks, the fear factor, because you're not really picking up strangers anymore.
Exactly, because so you're able to go and look at somebody's Facebook and say, okay,
have friends in common,
probably not an axe murderer.
See the music they like. It's a way of taking the stranger component out of it. But it's weird. It gets into our culture of our private automobiles, our space. Do we want to share that with somebody?
Yeah.
Do we want to turn that empty seat? But in Denver.
But we're coming around to community in a lot of ways, and that it's like the digital space has reintroduced us to community, and it feels like this is kind of the next. It's like, well, geez, now that I've got digital community, can I have community? Am I willing to go there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a cultural shift. I mean, we ride in elevator cars with strangers, but to pick someone up, to go down Broadway today and pick somebody up who wants to go up to up to North Boulder.
Yeah.
Are you going to stop for that person now?
Yeah.
These dynamic ride-sharing companies that have started have.
Is that what's the category of like a Zimride?
Yeah, and it's been a real struggle. I mean, because a lot of these services have been introduced piecemeal. There's no cities that are offering incentives. I mean, in Boulder, if you brought someone into town via digital hitchhiking, can you park at the best place down on 9th Street? None of that's happening yet. There's no.
Where are the incentives?
Where are the incentives by the city? But in our country right now,
colleges are creating incentives, though, aren't they?
They're doing better.
I think Zimride is working with campuses to create closed sort of networks.
Yeah, and there's a lot of this happening in Germany and other places where gas costs more. Going on a long trip, is a lot of money for somebody. So there's a lot more coordination happening. So it's happening. I'm not going to say it's not happening, but I would say there could be a lot more that we're doing to enhancing that.
So you're in school and you're going to art center and you're, which is my dream already. You're living the dream, and then you come out and you get a job?
I got a job, yeah. I was hired by General Motors Advanced Concept Center, actually General Motors, to work in their advanced concepts.
That sounds like a good job.
It's a good job. It was a good job. But at that point, I had already started thinking about these kind of minimal vehicles that fit between cars and bikes and motor scooters. I'd been in Boulder with I couldn't afford my car.
Right.
So I went to a Vespa scooter, but I couldn't carry cargo and I couldn't keep a roof on me. And I was like, what's this gap
Why is
about?
there nothing in between?
If I want to go buy a cheap car, can I go to the Chevy dealer and say, I want that cheapest Chevy with no doors and no bumpers because I want to save money. And they say, well, that's not safe.
Right.
But I can go across the street and buy a motorcycle. So it's kind of inconsistent in terms of what's basic transportation. And
right.
I got interested in China and developing countries, and are they going to get automobiles like everybody? And this is 20 some odd years ago. And I got real interested in small types of vehicles that don't really exist. The golf cart was kind of the closest thing to them.
And do you think that's because you had grown up around bikes and Boulder and all that? So it was environmental in some ways.
I think a car that you can drive to Florida is not necessarily the best tool for getting around Boulder.
Was there a teacher that inspired you?
I had some design teachers, but not any that inspired me in this direction. But once I had this idea in my head of this vehicle, I mean, the part that you didn't say about me when you introduced me was my entrepreneurial side of it. So I designed some stuff. I designed some vehicles. Nobody wanted to build them. So I had to start the companies to go build them.
Yeah.
And took a lot of time.
So we should talk about that, because I wasn't trying to leave it out. You pretty much created a category vehicle through that mission that hadn't existed before.
Yeah, so we started with my partners that I found to start the company. We put a vehicle into production that is like a golf cart car, really. A cart car or a sub car. And it was just made for going a couple miles. I mean, half the trips in the United States are less than 3 miles.
Right.
And so I was just interested in what would be a basic little vehicle. And already down in Florida and Arizona, people were using golf carts as just basic transportation.
Yeah.
And we never had a chance to make enough of them. And there's the thing I designed is still in production, but
Mm-hmm.
we never made enough to really get the cost so far down where I'd like it. I mean, I'd like to have a $4,000 vehicle or something.
But they still exist, and are they under different brand names? I've seen.
Yeah, it's called GEM, Global Electric Motor Car, and it's owned by Chrysler now. And
Yeah.
there's been 50,000 built, and this has a really terrific safety record. And it's just a start, but it's kind of like the fax machine you bought, but you never connected it to the phone line. I mean, it's kind of like we did that vehicle before we really started to connect it into the systems
Yeah.
that we're talking about today.
Right.
So now the next step is to take these intermediate sized vehicles and put them into a system.
You've got some images that you brought that it would be fun to look at. The BMW C2 is kind of similar to somewhere between a bike and a.
Yeah, it's a different interpretation.
I wanted to show some of these images.
Should I take this?
No, we can put it right on here. Oh, we'll put it right here. So this was a pretty cool image, and I guess this just shows how many parts there are in a car, right?
Well, I think when you go down to Ideal Market here in Boulder, for example, I know that the average car trip there is 0.6 miles. So this is the kind of all the parts that we use in our cars to go 0.6 miles, and we talk about a bike as an alternative to this.
Right.
But there could be something in between that's not so complex as a car. This is cars 20,000 parts.
So, and to your point, you could take a certain amount out of a car. There was just a thing that I had tweeted out about. This guy gave a presentation in Denmark, and he suggests that if we really were rational, we'd wear helmets in cars and not on bikes, because you're more likely to sustain a head injury in a car.
Yeah.
But the automotive companies are really good at keeping that concept out of the vernacular, out of the discussion.
Yeah, we're right now in a society where we have one car for all trips.
But his theory is that it's a conspiracy to scare people away from bikes, and that's why helmets are promoted, and often promoted by the auto safety foundations and people like that.
It could be. I don't know.
I doubt it's a conspiracy, but it is just like one of those kind of things where it has that effect. People are afraid of the bike in a way they probably weren't 30 years ago. And in Europe, they've seen that. This looks like traffic to me.
That's Los Angeles. And so while we have so much attention to electric cars, which are a good thing to be doing, obviously, but we have to remember that's not a comprehensive answer if we have really heavy congestion in our cities.
Yeah. Well, we get in our cars because we want to get somewhere fast. And then often, it's taken me 45 minutes. It used to take me 45 minutes to get to work. It was 9 miles.
Well, most Americans don't think of their car. They think of transportation as their car. They don't really think often of the road. They don't really realize that they are tied to a system. Yeah. And that system is dependent on not everyone doing the same thing at the same time.
So if you were in an electric car, you're still stuck in really bad traffic.
Yeah.
I love this image. Can you describe this?
Yeah, so this is the same amount of people in each picture, the first being each person with their own personal car. And so like even here in Denver, I think we have 1.1 people per average in our cars. So that's, we're traveling at about a 20% load factor. I mean, airlines can't survive a week at that level of inefficiency.
And this is what it looks like in a bus?
This is the bus, the same amount of people in bus, and then the same amount of people in an open space there.
I mean, it's kind of crazy that many people is represented there.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of land that goes with automobile.
Yeah, but part of it I think is that we like those big steel boxes around ourselves, right? It's safe, and we were taught to fear each other, and hitchhiking would get you killed every time you did it, right?
Right, but I mean, we're now at a time where with the ideas of car sharing, I mean, why couldn't a Boulder have bigger cars to rent when you want to leave Boulder? Mm-hmm. And why couldn't there be smaller vehicles, around Central Boulder? So, so it's kind of like, if you're a bicyclist, would you rather bike in this town that's a bunch of SUVs, or bike in this town which is a bunch of, smart car, golf cart kinds of smaller vehicles? So
who's doing that? Like, what I've proposed a few times in a few talks, and probably just basically stealing your idea, is that the car companies become transportation companies, or somebody becomes a personal transportation company. I really don't care who it is.
Right.
And that it would be great if my key, right, which is all electronic now, if my key could go over to the bike at the bike share, swipe it,
Right.
unlock a bike. It could go to my car, start my car, but my car wasn't really just one car. It was a subscription to whatever's the appropriate vehicle.
Right.
For what, you know, because you drive the vehicle that's least appropriate because you kind of have it for the weekends. It
Right.
seems like most Americans have chosen their vehicle for, hey, you know how once a month we go camping?
Right.
Like,
Oh,
that's what we should drive
Yeah.
every day.
Yeah.
But there's an opportunity for companies to identify that and say, what you really need is a little vehicle during the week.
Yeah.
And then you may need this other thing on the weekend. And in fact, this other person who has a business needs the big thing all during the week and would actually love your little sporty thing, you
Right.
know, on the weekend.
So that's more.
Is
like
anyone doing that?
Not yet. That's more like a flexible lease. There's something like that happening a little bit starting in Europe with Peugeot, where you're buying into a service and you get to choose the vehicle that's right.
Mhm.
And so you're always kind of swapping it out for the thing that makes sense for that particular.
And
car.
do they charge a premium for that, or?
I can't speak to their pricing right now, but I know that it includes electric bikes, bicycles, and a variety of Peugeot vehicles. It's called MU, and it's a new transportation service. And so
Oh yeah, that's perfect.
Europe's ahead of us.
So it includes bikes even.
Yeah.
What else is it? I mean, the same key should work at the bike pass, or sorry, at the bus, and it should work if I grab the subway, right?
Well, yeah, and I use the metaphor of Tarzan from swinging from mode to mode.
Yeah.
But you need the modes. We need the vines. If you don't have the services available, I mean, we're moving from this idea of this one car takes you everywhere to all of a sudden having these distributed services throughout your town or city. You need to have those services.
Is it easier, just as a from a company point of view, is it easier for somebody like Peugeot to do this, or is it easier? Like I mean, when GM had its issues and probably continues to have its issues in a different way, you know, to me this seemed like the perfect inflection point potentially, because of the government involvement, that you could create a system that included government run operations like bus and subway, and bundle that with your personal transportation. That didn't happen. It seems like they're kind of going the opposite way, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think the opportunity is clearly there. I mean,
Or is it like a Hertz? Is the opportunity more for a Hertz?
It may be for a Hertz or for a Zipcar. And Zipcar is going to have an IPO, and could have the kind of funding to start expanding. Other companies could get into this as a transportation service company. Automakers are typically geared towards selling as many cars as possible, and so they're having meetings today on how to sell as many cars as possible, and not kind of how to get one big car for.
Are we having audio problems? You're okay? Okay. There's whispering. Should we talk louder? All right. I'm gonna see if there's any questions coming in through the Twitterverse. Who's your favorite company that's doing the kind of things that maybe you can't have favorites as a consultant?
I know that the innovation that I get excited about is happening on a global level. So there's things happening in Europe. There's some things happening in Asia that I think are very exciting. In terms of the United States, I look at, I see the need to really make our transit systems work better by helping with these kinds of first mile, last mile problems.
Mm-hmm.
I showed you the thing I call mobility, because it's like in the morning, it's like the routes you need to get to transit in the morning, and then you get to work or whatever, you need to get from transit to your office. And so we need to solve that first and last mile problem. And there's not as many people doing that yet.
Yeah.
But I would like the Googles of the world and the companies that really want to kind of crack this nut to think about transportation and include intermediate sized vehicles, and think about the kinds of things that can happen once you kind of get people into a shared models where they're all not large full-size cars for every trip.
Mm-hmm. Is there enough of a demand on the consumer side? Is part of the problem that companies are just saying there aren't people out here that want this yet?
Well, we're not showing it. I mean, we buy cars by doing test drives, and so this new system, this enhanced, what public transit could really be, it has not been built in the United States, and there's no place for someone to go try it.
Yeah.
And if we built it in a corridor. Took one light rail system and built a corridor where you could get to and from the transit much easier. You had car sharing to mix with that. All of a sudden, owning 2 cars might not be something you have to do in a household. Owning 1 car and having this membership, and then you build that corridor where people can try that. I think we'll be very surprised how many people like this kind of solution.
This is sort of off the topic. We've really been talking about bundling transportation a lot.
Yeah.
But someone, Captain Fantastic, has tweeted in a question about alcohol and hydrogen. Can you talk to fuel? I mean, it seems like it's not your focus, right?
My focus is form. That essentially you can change all the fuel and still be stuck with these very, very big vehicles and very, having trouble moving them down the street because everyone else is in the same thing.
Yeah.
But I in terms of electric vehicle or hydrogen powered, I think that all this stuff has promise and is likely to happen. I just think that by going into this more of a smart multimodal future I'm talking about, we can create a much more economical way for consumers to get around, which I think will help us move to these new systems, in these new fuels faster.
Roxana tweets in that we just don't have the population density, and that this is just destined to fail without that.
Well, again,
you talk to thick and thin.
Thick and thin cities. So there's a number of people that are looking at the thick cities and the dense cities about how we solve those problems by removing more cars. I think right now in the thin cities, it's more challenging because we have to create a network for this to really be special and really work well. That's challenging. But there are already people that are using their bikes to ride down to their zip car and use their car. These things are starting to happen, so it's not so much will they happen or won't they happen. They are starting to happen. And unfortunately, we're at a time when all the state transit agencies or the city transit agencies, they're all reeling back. There's 90% cut services right now in the country because of the economy. Yeah. So how does this get started? We really need to we almost need like I've said to you, in kind of an anti-smoking campaign. We need to kind of get out and share the vision of what could happen. And the fact that I made little cars and little vehicles, I think other people could be new bikes.
Who is the transportation visionary? Who's the Al Gore of personal transportation? You can't say yourself. Besides you.
Well, there's a very small group of people that I'm in a club with that are really chewing on this thing from the comprehensive standpoint.
But is there a messiah type? Someone who's just got the podium. I don't know if there is.
I don't think got the podium in terms of really making a
or traded the podium. Al Gore started with a presentation, and it was PowerPoint, and then got with some people and figured out how to make a movie out of a PowerPoint presentation.
This movement hasn't got.
I've seen your PowerPoint.
Well, it's not gotten out there yet, sort of in the way that it needs to. But so there's not one PowerPoint that's out there that's the Al Gore PowerPoint yet.
Yeah,
it needs to happen
though. Because it could kickstart. I think what's happening naturally is there is this notion of community that's being reintroduced through the web and technology, and we're becoming more and more physical with the concept of it, and this is really part of that because if we're afraid of each other, I don't think this is going to work. One of the things tweeted in by Matt Yorit, I can't say it, Matt, sorry. He's like, how do you keep these cars or these vehicles or these bikes from being abused, by customers,
Well, that's these are the smaller details to me. How do rental car companies?
But I think it points to the notion that it's like I don't know, I really want to share. Yeah, I don't want to sit on a seat with gum on it, or
But it's like if I had this little smart car or even something smaller that got me around Boulder. Yeah. This little kind of beach walking vehicle just gets me around when I need to go farther than I can walk. And then when I need something bigger, I can rent something bigger. I can rent something. Volkswagen's going to make a narrow lane car. I could rent that and go down to Colorado Springs. Mm-hmm. It's right now our cars are like our shoes. But it's one kind of shoe for everything you do, from going to work to going to the funeral. We don't switch it in any way. And so this car sharing thing is happening. It's happening in Europe faster than it's happening in the United States at some level in terms of the integration. But to me, it's an exciting future where you can actually have more cars. You just don't have to own them. And I do think there's ways in thin cities where it's like you can't do it in thin cities. In suburbia, it's easy. You almost like need a stool to reach the system. You need smaller vehicles to get to to the transit or to the car share station or a pod.
There's a public transportation, which you said once during the show. You said those words. Normally you say the words personal transportation,
right,
and it includes buses and subways and trains, but there's an enormous stigma on public transportation.
Right, and we need a laboratory to kind of reinvent it. I've heard people say, I would like to be able to take my dog on the train. Could that be? I've seen people say, I want a woman's only subway car. I mean, there's a lot of ideas out there of how you can actually make public transit much more friendly. But I've seen studies that say that 80% of the people in thin cities in suburbia, 80% can't get to transit conveniently or from it. 80%. So all of this talk about fast tracks and all these light rail systems in Denver, it could be as many as 80% of Denverites can't actually get to it very easily. So that's, to me, the big issue that I've been trying to figure out is, can we just put better bike lockers down to the stations, or can we do the B-cycle tied in with the with the transit system? But
some of it is just the technology making it cool, potentially. Technology, culture, and really talented people making it cool. When we at the agency bought a bus, right, so we could do a couple rounds and pick people up for people who don't want to drive in, I was shocked at the amount of people that were just like, I ain't riding a bus. And because I thought buses were cool. I actually love buses and wanted to have the entire agency on a bus when it was smaller and just drive around the country on one of those big buses and stop in at clients. And I just assumed buses were cool. They're not cool, apparently.
They're not cool to everyone.
We tried to make a cool bus. It's got bullet holes in it.
The things that I'm talking about are multimodalism. And actually, where most Americans know multimodalism is from air travel. So you drive your car, let's say, to the Denver airport, you fly to Chicago, and then there's going to be a shuttle bus that takes you to the car rental lot, and then there's going to be a car rental car. And sometimes it actually works exactly when it's supposed to. Have you ever had that experience when you got out of the airport and the rental van showed up at exactly the right exact second?
I've traveled enough that it's happened hundreds of times, actually.
Well, it's a nice feeling when all the kinds of pieces kind of like a clockwork just kind of fit together and move you through that process. And
we need to get government out of it potentially, though. I'm not anti-government, but in Miami, I just went to the airport and they just totally rejiggered their rent-a-car thing. So instead of the Hertz van coming and picking you up, it's a city-run thing, and it ain't there as often. And when it drops you off, really far from where you need to go. And they improved it into a total failure.
Yeah, well, I can't speak to that one either. But it's we need to build a culture.
You didn't design that, then?
I did not design that.
No, it's good. Yeah, it's a big cultural shift, I think, for people. What's been done out there with buses that you think has kind of created that cultural shift, even globally?
Well, the buses, there's a thing called bus rapid transit, which is turning buses more into light rail trains. I think I have a picture of one of them on there. So you're starting to see bus design get a little bit more inspired. So it's almost like the Audi designers are designing buses, and that's cool. That helps a lot. We see in Boulder and places we put a couple bikes on our buses. There's more people that would like to carry more bikes on their buses than that probably now.
Mm-hmm.
So could we start seeing new vehicles for that?
So that's what these are, right?
Yeah. So the lower down here, that's a bus rapid transit vehicle. It's a two-car bus. Looks like a train, and it runs around LA. If you've been to LA, you've seen these things all over the place.
And what's this one? This one actually looks a lot like a train.
It's a light rail / tram.
Oh, it is a train.
But it's a train, yeah. And so right now, I mean, if someone said to me, "Go fix Phoenix," how do you fix Phoenix? I would say, well, I mean, you don't have time to do the light rail in terms of all the costs, but you can do it with these bus rapid transit vehicles. And then what you'd want is, I mean, pardon this, but it sounds like you can almost use golf carts to get to the light rail or to the bus rapid transit. And so I said you could fix Phoenix with, I think, golf carts, super buses, rental cars, and iPhones.
So can you talk to, is it Curitiba?
Curitiba.
Curitiba.
So Curitiba is a city in Brazil, and what people you don't hear about this is it's a very inspired transit system in Curitiba, and the reason it happened is really because the mayor, get this, the mayor of that city was a designer. He's an architect.
Yeah.
Scary what happens when you actually have architects and designers.
And they've had several architects as mayors down there.
Yeah. And he was very inspired, and he built these busways. He took streets where just only buses could go, and he created buses that looked like trains, and he created elevated platforms where you've already paid for your trip, like at the trains, before you get on the bus, so you don't slow the bus down with fare payment and all.
Mm-hmm.
And he created a very elegant, cost-effective way of moving people through the city, and the quality of life and the standard of living in that city versus the other cities around is much, much better as a result of this.
And you go into this platform, it's elevated, you pay your fare, it's air conditioned, climate controlled. The bus pulls up, you don't step down and back up.
Flush right on.
You walk straight into the bus. In general, it's just like a really nice subway experience, right?
Yeah, and they've done this more recently in Bogota, Colombia. Just a mayor there brought in a transit system that just really dramatically changed the city, really in just 5 years' time.
And the reason why they did it this way was they could not afford to do it with trains, subway, any other technology, from what I understand, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a really cost-effective way to go.
Now, I don't know if this is the number you've heard, but I've heard 70% of the population uses the bus now.
In the United States?
No, God. What's the number in the United States? No, in Curitiba. Curitiba.
It's probably in that. It's probably, I can't. I don't
What's
know.
the number in the United States?
Oh, it's I think getting to work. It's generally, let's say 20% of the United States might get to work using some form of transit, and 80% in the car. It's probably higher than that for the car.
And I think in that city it was probably pretty comparable in terms of what percentage of the population was using alternative forms of transportation, and it's gone to 70%.
Yeah.
Are we too arrogant in the U.S. to look to South America? Are we too arrogant in North America to look to South America?
Possibly. I mean,
I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
I just have noticed a bias. We look to Europe.
Yeah.
And if Europe's doing it, we'll consider it, but it's European, it's some sort of socialist plot. And then we won't even, we'll never, we never
I'll come
look
back
south.
to the Denver area or Southern California. I mean, you can't talk to me about a big transit program. To me, at least, you can't talk to me about it without talking about local transportation, the feeder system. Whether it's a bicycle, whether it's a golf cart car, or it's some sort of a jitney. It's some sort of like a new form of taxis that pick you up with these little vehicles and run you back to your house.
Mm-hmm.
But we need, our frontier is the first mile or two from our house to the transit station. That's our frontier we need to solve.
Mm-hmm.
We need to redesign it. And we've got to create the places where these various modes can actually go.
I thought this was this is a really interesting image that touches on that idea.
Yeah, so I was...
Can you see this all right?
This is basically...
Glare, you got glare, or it looks all right? Go ahead.
No, you go ahead and then I'll...
No, it looks to me like what you've done is you've said if we take one lane, we can create a bike lane and this smaller sort
car.
of, yeah.
So this was a suburb out east in Illinois, which I took a picture. Actually had no sidewalk, but had no bike lane. And if you look at Google Maps, where they've now mapped the bicycle lanes, there's no bicycle lanes in this community really to speak of. And Boulder is in a bubble.
Yeah.
Most of our country doesn't have places to bike. And so I started thinking, since I'm such an advocate for smaller vehicles to reach transit or to reach a car share station, why not, have a small vehicle that people could drive locally around that community as their second vehicle,
right?
But then also create the infrastructure for the bike to come with it.
It's a cool idea, and I had never really considered it. That there would be three sizes of vehicles running down the road. You'd have bikes. In that lane, I think you could have pedal assist electric bikes as well.
Yeah.
And then you've got these smaller four-wheeled vehicles, and then cars. What's nice about it too is if you're on your bike, you don't have cars going by. You've got something going by that's a little bit faster and it's a little bit bigger,
softer,
but a little soft. Yeah.
I might talk to you.
Yeah. Less likely to feel comfortable with their survival if they run into you. So.
Yeah, I mean. Yeah. It's like the Big Apple things. Think different. I mean, we do need to think different in our transportation, and just simply saying we're going electric and then still have one car per person in this kind of thing is not really thinking different.
Yeah. Do you think that so when you think about cars like this and vehicles like this, do you think people should own them, or do you think they're part of a system?
Well, I think it's going to be there's kind of a soup to nuts, a range of how these little vehicles will be dealt with. It could be more like a golf cart vehicle, or it could be this much more advanced thing like General Motors showed in Asia, where these pods.
Oh, I have that. Yeah.
Pods come to you.
Let's look at that.
I mean, this is also very interesting because.
Keep talking.
Yeah,
There it is. Yeah.
So this was shown in Shanghai by General Motors. It was actually a joint venture between Segway and General Motors to show a new urban solution. Well, I mean, it's misleading to see a steering wheel on there, because these are really they're designed to be automated. So they're driverless robot taxis. They should be yellow.
Yeah.
And, you come out of your bar or something in New York, all the big cars and all the big stuff would have to be taken away or be in special zones.
Yeah.
And this little thing will zoom up to you. You'll get into it. It'll know your music. It'll buzz you to where you want to go. But it's basically this automated.
And how fast does something like this theoretically go?
Well, they actually said that goes 25 miles an hour. That's as fast as you need to go in the city.
I think 25, 30. In a configuration kind of how you laid out would be an ideal solution. And whether you're steering it or whether it's robotically steered, I don't know if it matters. Do you think that they saw the movie Tron? Because it's very Tron-like in the lighting.
Well, the funny part is they can do this now. I mean, there's no technology that keeps this from happening. There's you don't need battery technology or this is really an issue about urban design and transportation planning. How do you find a place that these little vehicles can operate and not run into an SUV? Or
who could be the guy is Dean. Kamen.
He could be.
Right?
He's
so Dean Kamen is like an incredible inventor and came up with the Segway and that came out of a wheelchair that he had created prior to that. And
they're looking right now, and they're looking. I've heard of island in Shanghai. They're looking at a big, huge development in Florida. I mean, they're kind of looking for places where this kind of a thing could fly.
Could be piloted.
But again, if you're going to ask me to ride these things, I don't want to own a bunch of cars and then pay for additional services. I want to be able to have all these different services available to me, so I don't have to own as many cars.
Well, I definitely don't want to own another one of these, so that shouldn't be the model. Yeah.
This is on demand.
So I don't think Segway has worked. Speaking of Dean, incredible invention, but it's
Well, we never.
Hey, I remember one of the headlines was, "What if you looked down and instead of feet you had wheels? What would be your reaction?" I would scream.
Yeah.
Ah!
Well,
what happened to my feet?
I look at it differently.
Anyway, it doesn't I thought it felt like it tried to replace walking. I want to have the appropriate thing. This seems like it could be it. It's the same brilliant technology, but.
Well, there was never a lane for Segway or for light vehicle. I mean, it was either had a choice of getting onto the sidewalk, which then made it look like a walking replacement, or to be out on the road with the cars, which it wasn't.
Yeah.
And there was no place. And then Segway never really kind of presented it as a new link in the mobility chain. They kind of presented it as, well, actually kind of their message got out ahead of them with that book. And so they never really said, hey, if we have in the United States people that live a quarter of a mile from transit, if you live farther than a quarter of a mile from transit, you might not take transit. A little vehicle like that's powered, that takes someone to a transit station, to me would be a great thing and get a car off the road.
Yeah.
But it was never really presented in that kind of a context.
Yeah. And you got to really hate walking and biking to ride a Segway. Do you know that the guy that bought it in the UK, did you see what happened?
Unfortunately died.
Yeah.
He had actually just bought 1,000 Segways for vets that had lost their legs to use them.
And he drove a Segway off a cliff.
Yeah. Sad.
That is sad. Kind of ironic though. But
well, I'm
just trying to get you to lap first.
It's your helmet issue. These are vehicles that go 12 miles an hour, and people wanted you to wear helmets on them, and it's like, hey, when people start wearing helmets when they jog, then I can see the reason to have helmets on the Segway. I mean,
or when they drive.
It's a very benign little vehicle that takes up a teeny little footprint, and it should not be used to replace walking. We need to walk more. There's no doubt.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm getting at. Like we can walk more, and that'll be okay. I'm going to take some more Twitter questions. If there's the Fiat 500 is coming, analysis of that?
It's
like a Mini pretty
it's
much,
like
right?
It's smaller than the Mini. What you started with the Mini, it's better to have small vehicles in the United States. I think it's great. It's great that they're bringing that to the States.
And I think Mini, when we were working with them, I kept encouraging them to come out with something smaller, because when your name is Mini, it's really bad for your brand to lose that position of having the smallest thing.
Yeah.
So they actually would be the perfect brand to legitimize the space that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So do you think that there's Lane is tweeting in, do you think there's the uphill battle ahead for getting politicians to support new ways of transportation?
Yeah, this is going against the grain, so there's definitely an uphill battle part of it. But my hope is that we can find ways. I said a campaign. I'm looking currently at ways to start campaigns or get young people or interested public involved. I mean, the politicians they do work for the people. I mean, if the people can see that there's an opportunity to organize their city and community better, so they can live better. It might be easier for their kid to get to school. There are ideas we haven't talked about. It's like how the baby boomers are retiring, how they're going to get around. Should they keep driving? What about the 16-year-old? Can he have a junior car? I mean, we have an opportunity of restructuring this, but we have to kind of create a lab, if you will, and start working together to do it. But I think when people see these ideas and see the power of them,
But do you need a champion? Do you need an Al Gore of the space to keep telling this story? Because some of this exists. I mean, there are neighborhoods in Europe where you park your car outside the neighborhood. There's neighborhoods in Florida that are using all the sort of golf cart type vehicles within the neighborhoods.
The Zim rides that you mentioned, the Zim rides, the Zip cars, the transit agencies. There's no association. There's no
right. There's no group.
There's no group.
Yeah.
And
there's no Got Milk.
No, there's no Got Milk.
Yeah. That could happen.
Got 3 extra seats, but no Got Milk.
Yeah. What do you think that something like a gas tax is required, or do you think gas will just go crazy on its own?
Well, I mean, my vision of how to change the world is you have to show compelling opportunities of how things can be before you start to really dial up the hurt. And so I think it's hard to start saying we're going to put more gas tax on people without really having more compelling.
Really good options.
Really good options.
Really good options. Yeah. This is a question about how do you ensure there's always enough cars available? Which again, it's a little bit like, I don't know if I could do this, because to move into this space sounds risky. Where at least with my car, I know it's there all the time.
Yeah, and it's going to be a process. But I mean, usually when I fly and use a car rental service, I don't really worry about them having a car. It's been years and years since they didn't have a car for me. I mean, in terms of the logistics of figuring that stuff out, that's not my area of expertise, but I'm not very worried about those kinds of things.
About the balance,
supply,
that's just something that the market will figure out.
Yeah.
With what you're imagining doing next, right? What would you like to dedicate the next 10 years to personally?
Well, I'd like to.
If someone's out there and they,
someone out there. I'd like to find partners, whether they be companies, foundations, individuals, people that want to make this change that I'm talking about. I'd like to see it be something where we go out and envision what things can be, but we also kind of connect the design and even entrepreneurial kind of component to a platform for creating solutions that fit into this. So there's going to be new businesses, maybe that jitney idea to go down to Houston's transit. There could be a new business opportunity in there.
Right.
Or there might be a need for a new type of electric bicycle, or maybe a little electric three-wheeler with a roof on it. I don't want to necessarily design or create or manufacture those vehicles. I would like to be able to inspire other people to see this opportunity, that we're talking about a need for local transportation, which is a smaller, more human scale. It's also easier to build. It's easier to fund. It's easier to capitalize. It is a good place for junior to go make something, design something. It's not an automobile that goes 80 miles an hour on the freeway.
Yeah.
So I think that there's something there, and then there's the need for working with the communities for maybe how do we create, maybe do we need special lanes for light vehicles, or maybe not. Reinventing. I mean, could the FedEx, instead of coming to my house, go to a little depot in the community where I could pick it up, or flag a button and have the kid bring it to my door door, but have consolidated packages. So we design these mobility centers, these mobility hubs. So we're really, the cool part of this is kind of a redesigned vehicle transportation. This is also a redesign your community and your city kind of a platform.
Right.
And I definitely need help.
Yeah, it's something that nobody's going to do alone, I don't think. If for you, it's not so much about the vehicle anymore at all. And you went to school, you learned how to design vehicles, and now it seems like you're getting off on designing systems a little bit more.
Well, that's where I needed to go to make anything really meaningful happen.
What do you think is happening if you and I went to Art Center in Pasadena right now, and you graduated in what year?
87.
So if we went there and we talked to the graduating class, I don't know how many folks will graduate this year out of that school. Where will their passions be? You were the only one of your graduating class that was kind of like, I want to design between a bike and a car, and take on that space. Do you think it's changing?
I know it's changing slightly. I mean, I know I collaborate with one particular teacher at Art Center today, so we share ideas, and we're on the same wavelength, and so he's doing programs that kind of expand the students' thinking beyond just car design and car ownership.
Yeah.
But everything is changing. The business models are all changing, and so I've hoped he would take those solutions and show cities and mayors and of the kinds of things that could be designed.
Why? If you look at architecture schools, sometimes an architecture school will go to a city, and they will take a group of students and they will spend a semester or a few weeks in that city and use architecture to tackle social problems. Why aren't they, or are they doing the same thing? It seems like within this kind of design, you could take a group of these students and plunk them into a transportation pickle and say, how would you solve this? And work with the community to actually solve it.
Well, it's really exciting to go really further into the future. I mean, like there's GM autonomous little vehicles. I mean, they're electric, so they could drive into buildings. You could actually start to really blur the interface between personal mobility and architecture and city design. And so there's some really sort of exciting things that can happen.
Yeah, that's really awesome.
Once you kind of cut away, I don't need to be on the freeway with this vehicle, and really rethink things.
But why, Art Center's got a lot of pull. Art Center says to, Segway, we need 20 of these, and we're going to go to some neighborhood in Detroit, and we're going to pilot and allow people to see a different kind of transportation system actually working.
Yeah.
Why not?
Well, it could happen. I mean, I think in terms of those 20.
But it's not happening. I'm just sort of challenged. Like I kind of don't get it. Like, is transportation as a culture so selfish that I mean, there are architecture students that are doing this like crazy. Like,
but let's go back to
where
are 20 segues. I mean, we're trying to create a network. And this is not Google. Google got rich very quickly because they weren't dealing with ads.
But architecture students go build neighborhoods sometimes.
Yeah, they do. And I would say that this is like the first fax machine. You have a fax machine,
I'm saying there's something wrong with Art Center.
Okay, that's all right.
That they're not even thinking about it.
Well, I think that ultimately we're trying to.
It's a cultural problem, though.
But
it's not really Art Center.
Consumer,
I take that back. I'm not mad at Art Center. There's a huge opportunity.
Yeah, and we also need to train systems thinking, teach systems thinking better than we
do. Yeah. But I think that when you're in school, though, and you're just sketching cars, you're so removed from the problem. How do you? That's what some of these architecture programs do, is they put you into a really bad problem. Like go to a Brazilian slum and spend 2 weeks and see what you think about architecture and its potential to solve problems. Then can we do the same thing with cars? That's all I'm saying, or transportation.
Well, I think it's a good way to think about it.
You could teach that course.
I'm ready.
Are you?
Yeah.
I mean, that would be something that would make a lot of sense for them to. And who do you really admire in this space? I mean, I admire you in this space, and you've taught me a lot. Who do you admire?
Well, there's some people that are thinking a lot of similar ways. There's a woman at the University of Michigan, Sue Zielinski, who's working on what she calls new mobility.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some things happening in Los Angeles right now that are very similar to what I'm talking about with when I said mobility, but I talked about these stations,
Yeah.
integrated mobility hubs. So they're in LA right now, they're making it so you can take your bicycle down, you have a locker, bike station you can store your bike in. When you go to the next station, there'll be a bike you can rent, there'll be an e-bike you can rent, and there'll be a car share vehicle you could rent. So these integrated mobility hubs is beginning.
It's a business, or
This is the Los Angeles Department of Transportation.
so it's the okay.
One guy with a twinkle in his eye and gets it and is moving forward.
Nice. And are there some websites if people want to get more educated about this? Where would I go?
Well, that's probably needs to be with the Got Milk campaign. We don't have as many good websites. There's a really interesting website. A guy named Jerry Schneider out of University of Washington has an interesting website on all the really advanced like PRT, personal rapid transit, things on tracks, and all kinds of wild new things that we could be doing. He does a better job than anybody of just kind of keeping up on.
Is that like the track that runs across the sky and it's got people hanging from it? Yeah, I've seen that.
Yeah, there's a number of those ideas cropping up right now.
It looks a little pricey. Like what I love are the ideas like the bus, that you just tweak it a little bit and suddenly everybody rides the bus.
Well, it needs to be a matrix where you can start to have, any of those things. So if they put that PRT in South Denver at the Denver Tech Center, and then downtown Denver's got B-Cycle, and Boulder's got this, all of a sudden you start to have enough of those options populated that you don't really need to have as much car ownership going on.
Yeah. But I'm not sure that we so much have to, I mean, I could be wrong, but do we really have to invent, or do we have to just innovate on what we have?
More innovate on what we have.
Yeah.
But I think we need to present visions. We need to present visions of what cities could be, and then start to modify our cities.
Mm-hmm.
To just start modifying our cities without ever having a vision of what it could be is a much harder task, and that's what we've been going through.
The visionaries, you mentioned the mayor in Curitiba. I've never Curitiba. And I think about Mayor Hickenlooper, who's done a lot of progressive things with transportation in Denver. And mayors actually get together to share who's doing what and who's doing what well.
Well, Ken Livingston, the mayor of London, who did the congestion pricing,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was really a ballsy move.
Yeah.
And, I couldn't even see that happening in Boulder, but they did it in London.
Yeah.
And so some of this is up to the mayors and to the politicians to now have some courage and say, let's make some real change here.
But national politics is often, at gridlock. Local politics, things happen. And this network of really brilliant mayors could maybe that is the important network on transportation that needs to be created.
And it's important to note that solving this, I mean, if we just worked on the Denver Front Range.
Wait, we're out of time almost. Go ahead, finish.
I mean, the region is where you want, that's the canvas. You want to do Phoenix, you want to do the Denver Front Range, you want to do Atlanta. One of those places could do all of this and not deal with the rest of the world and succeed. It's where the car's used for 99% of the trips each day that you want to start to populate with these new services and these solutions.
Well, this has been awesome.
I've enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Alex.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
It's been a while. So we'll see you guys next time. I'll play the music. It'll take me a while to find it and get it going. But we could pretend to talk while I do that. Playing the music, looking for the music. Still looking. I'm just gonna make it really awkward for a while now.
Awkward. So is my voice
I don't know.
impossible to hear?
Your voice was you were not impossible to hear.
Poor mic placement had nothing to do.
Yeah.
This was good.
I can't find the music.
That's a
Da na da na na ya na na na.